Sheriff James Albert, Chief Bob Stafford, the great Greensburg Police Department. It is great to be back in the Keystone State to stand with cops for Trump. But I want to tell you, I'm here for one reason and one reason only, and that is that Pennsylvania and America need 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House. But speaking of which, allow me to bring greetings from a friend of mine who loves the Keystone State, has been standing with the men and women of law enforcement every single day. And when I told him I was going to be with all you good people today, I think he sounded just a little bit jealous. So let me bring greetings and gratitude to all the cops for Trump and the great people of Pennsylvania from the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald Trump. You know, from the first day of this administration, President Trump has been keeping the promises that he made to the people of Pennsylvania. We rebuilt our military. We restored the arsenal democracy. And as a proud father of a United States Marine, I couldn't be more proud to report to you that we are finally giving our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard the resources and support that they deserve every single day. And I couldn't be more honored to be joined today by an extraordinary American, an Army Ranger, a decorated combat veteran, and the next congressman from Pennsylvania's 17th Congressional District. Join me in thanking the great Sean Parnell. Thank you, Sean. So we've rebuilt our military. And before this pandemic struck, we revived the American economy. After the slowest recovery since the Great Depression, under President Trump's leadership, we created more than 7 million jobs and poured a foundation on which the economy of Pennsylvania and America is already coming back. We supported the rule of law and the right to life. This president appointed a record number of judges to our federal courts, and every day President Donald Trump has stood without apology for the men and women of law enforcement. With this president and this administration, we back the blue. So for all he's done, and for all we have yet to do, we need 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House. You know, I know the president spoke for most Americans not long ago when he said, and I quote, "The vast majority of police officers in this country are selfless and courageous public servants." And so you are. When others run away from danger, police run straight into harm's way. Counting our lives is more important than their own. Putting their lives on the line to protect someone who, in most cases, they'd never even met. And nowhere has that been truer than over the last 5 months, here in Pennsylvania and all across America. You know, our hearts grieve with the more than 150,000 American families that have lost loved ones. And as we continue to marshal a whole of America response to the coronavirus pandemic, we all have a role to play, to do our part, to slow the spread, to protect the vulnerable, and to save lives. But in these challenging times, none have done more to save American lives than our heroic healthcare workers, first responders, and men and women in law enforcement. They've been there. They stood in the gap. And you saved lives in the midst of this pandemic. And for that, you have the thanks and admiration of the American people. It's amazing to think, especially in the wake of that heroism, that some of the leading politicians in the Democratic Party today liken law enforcement officers to stormtroopers. I mean, even Joe Biden said not long ago that well-armed police become the enemy when confronting lawlessness in our streets. Well, I want to assure you, your president knows, this vice president knows, and the overwhelming majority of the American people know that the men and women of law enforcement are the best people in this country. Law enforcement isn't the problem. Law enforcement is the solution. That's why President Trump and our entire administration back the blue, just like all of you. And we'll stand with the men and women on the thin blue line every single day. And you are literally what separates us, separates order from chaos. Security is the foundation of our prosperity. And you've made the freest and most prosperous nation in the history of the world possible. You make it possible for this nation to thrive, to prosper, and in these challenging times to recover, and for every American to be able to live in peace and security. My fellow Americans, we're passing through a time of testing. But I'm here today because soon we will come to a time for choosing. And the choice in this election has never been clearer. The stakes have never been higher. It really is a choice between freedom and opportunity versus socialism and decline. Joe Biden and the radical left offer a path starkly different than the path President Trump set our nation on 3.5 years ago, where we've cut taxes across the board for working families, small businesses, and family farms. Joe Biden would actually raise taxes by $4 trillion in the midst of a global pandemic, where President Trump cut more federal regulations already than any president in American history. Joe Biden would bury our economy under an avalanche of red tape, stifling American jobs. And Joe Biden has a $2 trillion plan to abolish fossil fuels, which means the end of fracking in Pennsylvania. Well, we're not gonna let it happen. We're gonna stand for less taxes, less regulation, and more American energy. And President Trump has stood for the rule of law and the sanctity of life. Joe Biden, for his part, supports taxpayer funding of abortion. And he believes that America, in his words, is systematically racist. And that law enforcement has, again, and I quote, an implicit bias against minorities. Where President Trump has supported the men and women of law enforcement from day one, Joe Biden and the radical left say we have to choose between supporting our police or supporting all the families of our communities. Well, the American people know we don't need to choose between supporting law enforcement or supporting our African American neighbors. We can do both. We have done both, and we will keep doing both for 4 more years. But the truth is There's cities across the country that are buying into that choice, stepping away from support for law enforcement, believing they have to choose between the men and women who protect our community and the families of our communities. In fact, in Minneapolis, it was just reported that city's already begun dismantling their police department. In New York City, Mayor de Blasio actually cut the New York PD's budget by $1 billion. And when Joe Biden was asked if he would support cutting funding to law enforcement, he said, yes, absolutely. You know, amid efforts to defund police across the country, cities are also struggling with rising crime rates. The truth is, history teaches that weakness arouses evil. And as we see major cities across the country buying into the agenda of the radical left, we're seeing crime rise across America. Atlanta saw a 19% rise in shootings, a 9% rise in murders. Chicago, a 42% rise in shootings, a 39% rise in murders, and in Milwaukee, more than 50%. And a 100% increase in murders in Milwaukee, Wisconsin from the same time last year. It's incredible. Philadelphia has seen a 54% rise in shootings and a 20% rise in murders. Just this past weekend alone, 59 people were shot in Chicago, 8 in South Bend, Indiana, 13 in Syracuse, New York. And in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 4 people were shot in separate incidents just hours apart. Men and women of Pennsylvania, this has got to stop. We must restore law and order to the streets of our community for every American of every race and creed and color. But the truth is, those heart-wrenching numbers are just a preview of Joe Biden's agenda. And the truth is, you won't be safe in Joe Biden's America. After years of plummeting crime rates under President Trump, Joe Biden would double down on the very policies that are leading to violence on the streets of America's cities. When Democrats call for defunding the police, remember what's at stake. Law and order, safety, and the peace of mind that you, your family, and your children have every right to enjoy as citizens of the greatest nation on earth. So I want you to hear this directly from me. On behalf of the President of the United States and our entire administration, we're not going to defund the police, not now, not ever. We're going to back the blue. We're going to back the blue with more resources and more support. We're going to back the blue by making resources available to law enforcement agencies all across this country at every level, like funding 4,000 new police officers through the COPS program. And as the President announced about a month ago, by making more resources available to police departments at every level to improve training and accountability. You know, I know all of you know, no one hates bad cops more than good cops. Now, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis, and justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting, looting, and arson that took place in the days that have followed. Burning churches is not protest. Tearing down statues is not free speech. Blinding officers with laser pointers isn't peaceful protest. Those who do such things aren't peaceful protesters. They're criminals, and they will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And again, the choice is clear. When rioters and looters were desecrating our nation's capital, Joe Biden sent out a press release. President Donald Trump sent in the National Guard. And in the wake of violence on the streets of Portland, President Trump sent in federal law enforcement to protect the federal courthouse and made it clear that the governor and the mayor of Portland needed to do their job or we would do it for them. And as you may have heard, after 67 days of violent protests that actually saw 245 federal law enforcement officers injured, yesterday, Oregon's governor finally agreed to send state troopers to quell the violence in Portland. Now, we welcome the governor's decision to deploy state law enforcement to end the violence. And this morning, we saw Portland police started to secure a park across from our courthouse. But let me be clear. Federal law enforcement officers are not leaving Portland until the federal courthouse is secure and law-abiding citizens in Portland are safe. That's what leadership looks like. That's the leadership of President Donald Trump. And while Joe Biden and the Democratic Party continue to coddle the radical left, from our nation's capital to Portland to cities across the country, President Trump is taking action to restore law and order. Just last week, the president announced what we call Operation Legend, a surge of federal law enforcement officers into our cities. Cities that have experienced enormous surges in violence and crime due to misgovernance and defunding efforts of the radical left. The operation is named after a little boy, a 4-year-old African-American boy, Legend Delafero, who last month was gunned down while sleeping in his home in Kansas City, Missouri. He spent that night building a pillow fort with his dad. When he was shot, he was sleeping in the fort he and his dad had made. Police arrived on the scene. His dad rushed him to the hospital, but he was too late. That little boy died from his injuries. But little Legend will not have died in vain. And the operation in his name is going to bring peace and security to cities all across America. So help us God. When she heard about the operation, the surge of forces, his mom even said, if you're against that, maybe you need to reevaluate. You know, stories like Legends break the heart of the American people. But I also know it's what through the men and women who wear the uniform of law enforcement into service. I know you responded to a calling to protect the vulnerable, stand a watch. We know that that calling from the heart is why you count our lives more important than your own. You do it because you love this community, you love this state, and you love this nation. As President Trump said, we may come from different backgrounds, but we are united in our desire to ensure peace and dignity for all Americans. And you are the instrument of securing that for every American, from every walk of life. So for all that you do, on behalf of a grateful nation, I promise you, we'll always back the blue. And I believe with all my heart, you don't just have the gratitude of your president, but you have the gratitude and respect of the American people. You see it when you're walking a beat. You stop in to get a cup of coffee. You bump into people at the drugstore, the grocery store. You see the American people show their gratitude. They show their support. And I know you feel it every day. And I also want to assure you of one other thing. I know you're also carried every day into your service by the prayers of tens of millions of Americans who pray for you, who pray for your safety, who pray for your service. This is a nation of faith. I hear people speak about it every day, everywhere I go. And I just want to assure you, as you strap on that sidearm, you put on that uniform, you do not go alone. You go with the confidence of your neighbors and the grace of God. You know, the men and women of law enforcement bear a great responsibility. And it's always been true. The Bible reminds us that there's no authority except that which God has established, and that each one of you who protect and serve are servants for good, who do not bear the sword in vain. People of this country understand that timeless truth. We're grateful for what you do. And on their behalf and on our behalf, thank you for your service. So thank you for coming out today. It's wonderful to be back in Pennsylvania. Thank you for coming out to support President Donald Trump. Thank you for coming out to support the great Sean Parnell. And I just know, looking at all the enthusiasm in this parking lot, and all the enthusiasm that I saw on the way here, that if all of us do all that we can between now and Election Day, here in Pennsylvania and all across America, we're going to win a great victory for the American people. We're going to send Sean Parnell to a new Republican majority in the United States Congress. And we're going to re-elect President Donald Trump for 4 more years. And with President Donald Trump in the White House, with renewed Republican leadership at every level across this state and this nation, I'll make you a promise. We're going to see our way through these challenging times. We're going to make Pennsylvania more prosperous than ever before. We're going to make our cities and streets safer than ever before. And with your support and with God's help, we're going to make America great again. Again. Thank you all very much. God bless Pennsylvania and God bless you.